Right now, you're using something that billions of people depend on every single day to work, to communicate, to learn, to exist in the modern world. The internet, and buried somewhere in its history, is the name of the man whose idea made all of it possible. A man who conceived the fundamental technology the internet runs on. While the world was preparing for nuclear war, a man whose work was ignored, dismissed, and nearly buried by the very institutions that later used it to change civilization. Most people have never heard his name, and that might be the most remarkable part of this entire story. The year is 1959. The Cold War is at its most terrifying. The United States and the Soviet Union are pointing nuclear weapons at each other, and the US military has one nightmare: keeping its generals awake at night. If the Soviets launch a first strike and destroy America's communication infrastructure, the entire country goes silent. No orders can be sent. No responses can be received. A nation with thousands of nuclear weapons and no way to coordinate a response. That was the vulnerability. And a quiet young electrical engineer at the Rand Corporation was asked to solve it. His name was Paul Baran. The idea that changed everything. Baran was not famous. He was not a celebrated scientist. He was a methodical engineer who had immigrated to America from Poland as a 2-year-old child. He studied at night while working during the day. And when Rand asked him to design a communication network that could survive a nuclear attack, he did something nobody had done before. He looked at how the human brain works. The brain doesn't have one central processor controlling everything. It's a distributed network. Millions of connections, each capable of rerouting around damage. If one part is destroyed, other pathways take over. What if a communication network worked the same way? No central hub that could be destroyed. No single point of failure. Just a web of interconnected nodes, each capable of finding a new path when others went down. And then he added one more idea. Instead of sending a message as one continuous signal, break it into small blocks. Send each block separately along different paths. Reassemble them at the destination. He called them message blocks. Working independently in Britain at the same time, a scientist named Donald Davies arrived at a remarkably similar conclusion and renamed them packets. The process became known as packet switching, the fundamental technology that the internet runs on today. Every email you send, every video you watch, every website you visit, all of it moving through a network built on this idea. What happened next? Here's where the story gets complicated. Baran published his work in 1964. 11 detailed papers explaining exactly how this distributed network would work. He presented it to the US Air Force. He shared it with everyone who would listen. And the response? Skepticism, dismissal, resistance. AT&T, the most powerful telecommunications company in America at the time, told him it wouldn't work. Their engineers said the idea violated the basic principles of how communication networks operated. They weren't just unimpressed, they were hostile, because Baran's idea threatened everything AT&T had built, a centralized network that they controlled completely. His distributed model would make that control obsolete, so his work sat, acknowledged in research circles, largely ignored everywhere else. For years, nearly a decade passed. The world moved on, or so it seemed. The internet is built. Then the US military funded a project called ARPANET, the first wide-area computer network, the direct predecessor of the internet. The engineers who built it drew heavily on Baran's concepts. Packet switching became the core architecture. His distributed network model became the blueprint. But Paul Baran wasn't leading the project. The people who built ARPANET received the credit. The people who commercialized what followed became billionaires. The companies that built on top of it became the most valuable in human history. From online banking to streaming movies, from cloud computing to social media, from video calls to everything you do online today. All of it running on infrastructure whose fundamental concept came from a quiet engineer at Rand, who published 11 papers in 1964, that the world's most powerful telecommunications company said would never work. What Paul Baran actually got. Here's the full truth. Paul Baran was not completely erased. He received the National Medal of Technology. He was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. He was recognized by the people who understood what he had done. But walk up to 1,000 people on the street today. Ask them who made the internet possible. Almost none will say Paul Baran, the man whose idea, conceived in a Cold War research lab to survive nuclear attack, laid the foundation for connecting 8 billion people. He died in 2011 at the age of 84, quietly in California, while the technology he imagined was being used by more people than had ever lived on Earth at any single point in human history. The internet is the most transformative communication technology ever created. And the idea at its foundation, the concept that made it possible, came from one person sitting in a research lab in the early 1960s, thinking about how to survive nuclear war, and in doing so, laying the foundation for connecting the entire world. His name was Paul Baran, and the next time you send a message, or watch a video, or just exist in the connected world he helped build, you're using his idea, whether you knew his name or not. Subscribe to Mr. Overthinker, because the most important stories in history aren't always about the most famous people. Sometimes they're about the quiet ones, working in the background, whose names you never learned until now.